Okay, so today we're gonna finish talking. Well, we're gonna finish the current set of slides, which are mainly about sort of returns to healthcare spending in terms of improved health. Then the next set of slides, which are currently on the eCourses site, are actually adapted from a professor that I know at Harvard who came and gave a talk here a couple years ago, and I thought his sort of set of slides were really good. The sort of focus of the next set of slides we'll start today is on some of the stuff we've already talked about. So it's sort of about again healthcare spending, like overall levels of spending and increases in spending, what's driving the spending, and what you actually get in terms of health production from it. So there's gonna be a little bit of stuff that's some of the stuff will be a little bit familiar because you've already heard it in some of the last slides. But I think that the main benefit is that it goes into more details or more nuance about exactly how it is, or sort of what the decision-making process potentially by physicians is that leads to increased costs without commensurate increases in quality. And I think that's pretty interesting, and it sort of leverages evidence from actual clinical trials in terms of the effectiveness of different treatments and stuff. So I think you'll find it useful, even though there's a little bit of repetition. So last time we stopped, we were just talking about essentially which groups have healthcare coverage in the U.S. And so I think the last bullet, which we didn't quite get to, sort of the main point is that if you think about sort of a redistribution of healthcare expenditures away from people who currently have health coverage to people who don't have health coverage, so basically increasing coverage rates. So obviously, if you sort of keep on spending the same amount of money on people who already have coverage and then also cover those who don't have coverage, you would certainly expect overall population health to go up, or life expectancy to go up, because you're spending more, and probably more importantly, you're sort of increasing spending on people who have relatively low levels of spending since they're not currently covered. That being said, so that would just be a total increase in spending, right? Even if you didn't have a total increase in spending, even if you just kind of steered some of the expenditures away from people who are currently covered towards people who aren't covered, you'd probably still see an increase in overall sort of population health and life expectancy, just because we think that there are decreasing marginal returns to spending. So if you're currently spending $20,000 a year on one person and $0 a year on the other person, even if you just reallocated say $2,000, so it was like an $18,000 versus $2,000 split instead of $20,000 versus zero, you'd probably see an overall increase in average health just because the last $2,000 they got spent on the person who has $20,000 worth of insurance probably wasn't generating all that much. So you could certainly you could argue then that sort of redistributing healthcare expenditures would be good in terms of overall population health. Technically, that would be what we call a positive, not a normative conclusion, in that you do basically have to sort of take the standpoint that you're going to value all people's health equally, which I think, from the perspective of maybe the hypothetical social planner or something, you might be quite willing to make that argument. But this particular type of redistribution right there is not what we would call a Pareto improving redistribution, just because it's not the case that nobody is worse off, right? If we were to not increase overall expenditures and instead just redistribute the expenditures from one group to another, the group that's losing out on the expenditures would be harmed on the margin. Probably not very much, but still, not zero necessarily. So the overall cost, so we've sort of seen that there's sort of at least plausible evidence that the overall benefits of increased healthcare spending are at least equal to the overall costs, even if on the margin the additional dollar spent is not efficient. So sort of simply stopping and saying, well, okay, so the overall benefits are at least as great as the overall cost, therefore we shouldn't worry too much, is not, I think, the correct conclusion. So if we think about sort of the cost of healthcare, I think that's going to be a major issue going forward, regardless of what the net benefits of additional care are. So even if they're positive, even if we're sort of getting more than we're spending, that's not necessarily the best possible outcome, because we always like to maximize net benefits. So not just have positive net benefits, but basically get as much as we can for a given level of spending. So for example, clean water and sanitation have a huge impact on life expectancy and on quality of life. And so if you take those factors and then you also sort of maybe throw in antibiotics and vaccines, both of which are relatively cheap things, probably maybe those four things combined, you have had historically more of an impact on overall population health than pretty much all other healthcare expenditures taken in aggregate. That being said, we're spending now probably about 16% of GDP on healthcare expenditures. I don't know exactly what the amount we spend on clean water and sanitation are and antibiotics and vaccines, but I'm sure it's probably less than 1% of GDP, because even 1% would be over $100 billion per year now. So if it turned out that tomorrow we decided that it was going to cost 16% of GDP to supply clean water and sanitation and antibiotics and vaccines, certainly we would view that as being worth it. I mean, if we were faced with a choice where we either had to give up those things, we had to pay 16% of GDP in order to retain them, or we had to give them up, we would certainly choose to pay the 16% of GDP in order to retain them. There's no question that people would find them at least that valuable. But at the same time, we wouldn't be happy about that, right? So yesterday we were getting those things for less than 1% of GDP, and then tomorrow it turns out we're having to pay 16% of GDP for them. That would be a bigger impact on economic output than even a huge recession. So new technology. New medical technology can certainly increase general welfare, but ideally we'd like to be able to negotiate over price and have some sort of incentives for innovation while still maintaining some negotiating power over price. So this basically the issue here, so thinking about sort of new technology and how much we pay for it and then incentives for innovation, the issue here is that a lot of things in terms of medical treatments are items that have very high fixed costs, in particular have very high research and development costs, and then very low marginal costs. So the most extreme example of that are pharmaceuticals, which in many cases can be quite beneficial. The actual cost, for the most part, the actual cost of producing most pharmaceuticals is very close to zero, but it can be tremendously expensive to actually develop them, because there's the entire process. First of all, they'll test thousands or tens of thousands of different molecules, different basically compounds, to try to find something that appears to be effective for treating whatever condition they're targeting. And then so very few of those will sort of show any promise. Some of them will show limited promise based on whatever's happening in cell cultures or whatever. Then they'll carry those forward to experiments on animals, which will then eventually turn into sort of stage 1 clinical trials, which are experiments on humans to determine whether it's even safe to continue the tests. And then you get to stage 2, where they start to try to test for the efficacy, so whether or not it actually ends up improving the condition that they are trying to target. And then eventually get to stage 3, where you increase the sample for your clinical trial and try to figure out the correct dosing and everything. And at each of those stages, probably the majority of the existing compounds that have been carried forward end up having disappointing results and fall out. And so it can cost hundreds of millions or potentially even billions of dollars to sort of start at the very beginning, test thousands or tens of thousands of these things, go through all of the different stages of clinical trials, and finally come up with one thing that has some effectiveness and is safe for humans. So you might spend $100 million or even $1 billion or something developing this drug, and then after you develop it, you could potentially if you sold it at marginal cost, it might only cost like $1 or something to produce the dosages. And so if you ended up having a case where you didn't have any sort of intellectual property protection for it, so you weren't able to patent it, what would happen is that other companies would quickly figure out what it is that you're making and just produce a generic, and there's no way you'd be able to sell enough of it at a high enough price quickly enough to recoup the development costs. So this is a case where I think there's a lot of cases where like patents are of questionable value, but this is a case where if you didn't have patents, the entire industry would probably come to a screeching halt. So you have to provide some incentives for innovation. Basically, you have to have first of all the intellectual property protections for these drugs, and then furthermore, you need to actually be willing to pay for the drug once the pharmaceutical company has developed it. So that's like sort of an issue and a sore point in terms of how much the U.S. pays versus other countries. So basically, for a lot of pharmaceuticals, the U.S. pays substantially more per dose than most other countries that have like national healthcare systems. And the reason for that is essentially that we don't really negotiate on price. So even though any given health insurer is like a relatively large bargaining unit compared to certainly like the individual, they're still relatively small compared to say like the national healthcare system in the UK or something like that. So you basically have an entire country where the entire country is represented by this one bargaining entity and is going to decide whether or not to cover a particular drug. And so they'll negotiate with the pharmaceutical company that has a patent on the drug to secure it at the lowest price that they possibly can, with the sort of threat that if they don't, if the company doesn't offer a low enough price, then they'll just walk away and the company will lose sales to a population of like 60 million people or something like that, right? So at the sort of country level, a lot of these systems have a substantial amount of bargaining power. The U.S. doesn't really have that much bargaining power because, again, for the private insurers, any given health plan is not all that large, and in particular, like most large companies are just self-insured anyway. So like University of California is really self-insured. We're a large organization, but we have sort of no bargaining power compared to say the country of Canada. So for most healthcare or most coverage entities in the U.S., you don't have that much bargaining power. The one entity that would have a lot of bargaining power, basically the federal government through Medicare, as we discussed. Ironically, when they passed this Medicare Part D legislation back in like 2005 or so, one of the things so this was passed by the Bush administration with support from Republican Congress at the time. One of the things they put in there was actually a prohibition against the federal government negotiating prices with pharmaceutical companies over the drugs they're going to cover under Part D. So sort of any hope that the U.S. had of trying to secure better prices from the federal government's bargaining power was basically destroyed there. So the way that it stands right now, basically, the sort of thing you can feel good about is that the U.S. kind of provides like an R&D subsidy for the rest of the world in terms of being willing or being forced, whichever way you want to look at it, to pay the high prices for the drugs that will then provide the profits or the capital that pharmaceutical companies can use to develop the next generation of drugs or something like that. That's kind of a nice thing to do, I suppose, but maybe isn't so great from the perspective of the federal budget or the average consumer in the U.S. So in particular, the differences become really stark if you just kind of go across the border to our friendly neighbor in the north, in Canada. And so I'm going to sort of talk about the drug prices in a second. Most of the popular press, I think, about sort of the Canadian system versus the U.S. system is a little bit misleading. So it is true that if you think about sort of increases in spending, so for sure the level of spending is lower in Canada per person than the U.S. Spending is increasing in both countries, but at from a much lower level in Canada, so they don't sort of feel it quite as acutely as the U.S. does. One thing that you'll hear is sort of that there are queues or like long waits in Canada for particular surgical procedures where there aren't enough surgeons or aren't enough resources relative to demand. So that is true for specific procedures. It's not true for like access to your primary care physician or something. So if you need to go to the doctor, you don't have to get in line and wait, which ironically you kind of do in the U.S. often. I don't know about like the tank center, but once you run like a normal plan, you call up and ask your doctor for an appointment. Often they'll say, well, I can see you in 3 months or something. Unless it's like really urgent. So there aren't really sort of if you were to go up across the border and see a PCP, you wouldn't really have to wait, or at least certainly not any longer than you already have to in the U.S. Anyway, it is true that for particular surgeries, there may be sort of wait lists where you might have to wait like 6 weeks or 12 weeks or something for that surgery. The thing that's sort of interesting and maybe a little bit surprising is that there's actually no evidence that survival rates are any lower despite the surgery wait time. So even for something like having a tumor removed, there might be a wait, but either just the surgery isn't really mattering all that much, or they're able to basically sort of triage and figure out who should be getting the surgery sooner versus for whom it's not going to really make a difference if you wait a while. Whatever is happening, it doesn't actually show up in terms of survival rates for people being any lower for a given, like for having a given diagnosis in Canada that requires surgery relative to the U.S. So the last item here, or the second last in the slide, but getting back to what we're talking about with pharmaceuticals. So Canadian drug prices are definitely lower, but unfortunately, sort of importing drugs from Canada isn't really a solution. So typically, if the price of a good is lower in another country or when it's produced in another country, you would think that we want to encourage free trade and allow countries to specialize in their comparative advantage and import from that country and export something from our country to in exchange. In this particular case, that's not really an option because they're not, the drug prices there aren't any lower because of any sort of Canadian advantage in producing them. I would imagine, in fact, most of the drugs are imported anyway, but rather simply because the Canadians have negotiated lower prices, and they don't want to, even if like the U.S. approached them and said like, hey, you guys have negotiated lower prices, can we just kind of like piggyback on your discount and import a bunch of drugs from you? Canada would certainly, or almost surely, not agree to that because they don't really want to sort of become collateral damage in the fight between the U.S. and the pharmaceutical companies. Like people buying drugs in one country and then going to. Oh, I see. I thought you meant like sort of just for personal use. Like, I see. Ship them across. I guess at that point it's just sort of like smuggling. If you had like high cigarette tax in one state and low one in the other, I'm sure there are businesses where people are smuggling things across borders and stuff like that. Yeah. So, wouldn't surprise me. I guess the only thing is I don't know. Was it actually legal or was it, I guess it's EU, so in theory it's supposed to be like free trade and open borders, right? But I don't know. So I don't know that there might be businesses. There might sort of be like under table businesses where people are smuggling drugs out of Canada. I know that we have some Canadian friends, so sometimes they'll go back and they'll be like, hey, do you want me to buy you anything? Any drugs or not like illicit drugs, but prescription or non-prescription drugs, and bring them back for you. So I'm sure that's sort of this informal trade in smuggling, but certainly there's not like, it's not like Blue Cross is going to go to Canada and say like, hey, can you source all of our drugs for you? So I'm going to talk more about the pharmaceuticals in a minute, but before that, so the other distinction here to think about is that basically, so we think about the various types of coverage in the respective countries. So as we've said, in the U.S., we have sort of two main things. We have employer provided healthcare coverage, which you could basically view as being head tax, just a fixed tax per person that's going to come out of their wages. And then Medicare is providing coverage for everybody who's basically age 65 and above, and that you can think of as basically being funded by a flat tax because it is funded by a flat tax. So there's like a I don't know what it is, 1.45% or maybe, I think it's probably going up over time. But anyway, there's like a couple percent tax that comes out of your paycheck that is literally just a flat tax that goes towards funding Medicare. And like so Social Security has like about a 6% tax that comes out of your paycheck, and actually your employer also pays 6%. And I think it's true with Medicare as well, that they pay the additional like 1.45% on their end. But Social Security is different because there's actually like a cap where after you earn, I think the limit's probably around $110,000 right now, it goes away. So it's like you pay like 6% up to like $110,000 of income, and then the rest of your income is untaxed by Social Security. But Medicare is literally just like a flat tax that goes all the way up the scale. So you kind of have this combination of a head tax, which is like super duper aggressive, and then a flat tax, which is right between sort of aggressive and progressive. Canada is more of a combination of basically a progressive income tax, so they have a national healthcare system. It's funded by a variety of taxes. So there's income tax, that's of course going to be progressive. There's a sales tax, that's of course regressive in the sense that poor people tend to pay a higher share of their incomes as sales tax than rich people do. And then there's a corporate tax, which I would imagine on net is probably progressive, just because most stock holdings are by rich people. So there's sort of in terms of overall funding, perhaps not surprisingly, the Canadian system is funded in a much more sort of progressive manner from a taxation standpoint than the U.S. is. Now, if we thought about like, what would happen if we sort of moved to sort of a single-payer type system where the government was just paying for all of the costs? You would imagine that would probably reduce costs along a number of dimensions. So on the sort of benefit side, you could expect maybe some increase in life expectancy just because you would be increasing the number of the proportion of the population that has insurance. That being said, it probably wouldn't rise greatly just because even prior to ACA, only about like 15% of the population was uninsured, and that's continuing to fall as we speak. So there's sort of not that many additional people that you're necessarily covering. I mean, in terms of we have a large population, so when you actually think of it in terms of people, it's like 50 million people or something like that. But it's still a minority of the population. It could have maybe an impact on communities that have limited access to healthcare. The likely sort of more significant benefit would be in terms of reducing costs by constraining prices. So you move to basically a monopsony type situation where there's really just a single buyer of these these goods, which is going to allow that buyer to negotiate over prices. We've seen with like Amazon and its dealings with publishers lately, where Amazon is essentially like the main buyer of ebooks and things like that. There would also almost surely be substantial reductions in administrative costs or administrative expenses. So these are always like somewhat difficult to estimate, but sort of the general sense is that the administrative costs of private insurance are maybe in the range of like 20% or so of total expenditures, which is I guess the good news is not like 50% or 80%, but you're still talking about like 20% of maybe 10% of GDP or something. I mean, we're spending 16% of GDP on healthcare, but a lot of that is covered by Medicare. So the share that must be going through private insurance is I'm sure less than 10%. Yep. So there's like a combination of things. So there are incentives for employers to offer insurance, but if you don't have insurance through your employer, then you should be covered under the individual mandate. So that's that you have to buy it. So if you can't afford it, so basically there's like if you're lower income, there are subsidies in place that in theory should make it affordable for you. If you're sort of like middle income, so you don't qualify for that largest subsidy, but you still don't find it affordable because you have high expenses otherwise. Basically either you need to buy it or you pay a penalty. That you have to. I'm not quite sure what the threshold is for that. So if you went to something that was more like say Medicare or Canada, you would expect to have a substantial reduction in administrative expenses. So those systems end up spending like single digit percentages of total expenditures on administrative expenses versus double digit expenditures. So that's definitely real money. Hundreds of billions of dollars here, hundreds of billions of dollars thereafter, while it adds up. There would also be a reduction in prescription drug costs, but the flip side of that, so that's good, but it's not like there's no downside at all to that. There is potentially a reduced incentive for innovation. So ideally, what you would like from the U.S.'s perspective is to have some sort of international treaty that sort of spreads innovation costs across all developed countries, rather than having the U.S. sort of bear a disproportionate share of them. So I think sort of an interesting example in kind of the divergence in prices for pharmaceuticals between the two systems is thinking about Claritin, which is something that if you have allergies, you're probably aware of. So Claritin was long available in Canada for about $10 a month when it was sold over the counter, or it was long available in Canada over the counter for about $10 a month. And so I don't think it's prescription anymore, but it used to be prescription only. I don't know, does anybody take it? It's OTC now, right? Well, yes. Yeah, but that's kind of neither here nor there. No, I mean they just want sales limits on it, so you're not making that. I mean, I guess Sharing Flower, whoever owns it now, would be happy if you made meth with it. Say it's increasing demand for their product. But so it used to be, so it was basically always available over the counter in Canada. So it cost about $10 a month there. It was only available by a prescription in the U.S. for a long time. The co-payment in the U.S. is typically $20 per month. So what that means is that essentially like the drug itself would be priced at maybe like $100 per month. You would get the prescription from your doctor. It would be covered by your insurance because it's a prescription drug. So like when you go to if you go to Walgreens or whatever and you buy Tylenol over the counter, your health plan doesn't cover that because it's an over-the-counter drug. But if you had some sort of like, I don't know, so you could get Tylenol 3, which is Tylenol codeine. That's a prescription. That would be covered in codeine too. In some cases, like you'll get like you get your like Wisdom 2000 or something, and they'll give you like extra strength Motrin